This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Follow the Lead Podcast, a Christian Leaders Podcast powered by Greg Fay Insurance. If you haven't talked to my man, Greg Fay, do so today. Go to gregfayinsurance.com. Today on the podcast, I'm embarrassed to say this. You're going to find me fanboying a little bit. This is the queen of Christian podcasting, Annie F. Downs. Annie is the CEO and founder of Downs Books and AFD Incorporated. And listen, she has been a trailblazer in the podcasting space for Christians for a really long time. I loved this conversation with her ability to share her heart. We talk about what it means to live in 2 cities. We talk about single purpose league. We talk about how to lean into your calling and how that kind of plays out. Such a great dialogue with an incredible leader. I know you're going to love it. So now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Annie Downs. I'm so excited today to have the queen of Christian podcasting, a legend, a virtual for years, Annie F. Downs. Annie, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, it's such a treat, Tony. Thank you for having me. This is going to be fun.
Listen, I want to start with how we met because you did something wild. You've got hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers, and you put out to all of your people that you wanted to know what they podcast, because a lot of the people that follow you are podcasters, much like me. And then you went through, created a Spotify list and began listening. And then you went into DMs and you met people about their podcast. And listen, I was blown away when I saw you talk about the podcast that I recommended. Talk to me about the origin story of that whole idea and about why you wanted to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a less beautiful origin story than you wish it was. It was more that the industry of podcasting is changing really quickly. And people that, like me, that were the top of the game 5 years ago are having a lot more competition and a lot more trouble. There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, legacy podcasters that are talking to each other and going, what's happening to this industry? Wow. And why is what worked for us in 2019 not working in 2024? Why is what worked in 2022 not working in 2024? And so I wanted a better vision and a better, vision of what God was actually doing in podcasting. And so I thought, I need to listen to shows that are not my friends necessarily, and that are not the normal shows I listen to on a weekly basis. I probably have 15 shows I listen to every week. And so I thought, I want to know how many people that are friends with me on social media are also podcasters, and what are they making? What is working for people? Because what worked, for example, in 2019, before the pandemic, what actually worked is interview shows that pursued a varied audience. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Interview shows that pursued a varied, large audience. And then I asked, like you, I asked my friends in the audience to say, what show have you made and what's the best episode of that show? And if you will tell me, I'll listen. And we got 350 episodes. Wow. Which was not what I expected. I expected 100. And so I'm still working my way through the list. Honestly, Tony, I have not listened to all 350, but I'm working my way through. And my lovely and amazing assistant, Lillian, went through and made a playlist for me on Spotify that's available to anybody. It's just on our Spotify. And so here's what I learned, Tony, when I was listening through it. Number one, no one is making a show for everyone anymore. Yeah. That isn't why people make shows anymore. And so that's really good for me to hear, because it frees me up that I don't have to make a show for everyone anymore either. And so no one's making a show for everyone. They're making a show for the people that care about the thing that they care about. So whether that is faith and leadership, whether that is women's ministry, Disney, raising kids, recycling, I mean, everything under the sun you can find a show about. And that's newer. That's a newer adjustment to the industry. And the other thing that I really learned from listening to all the shows that I'm continuing to do is everyone just wants to help other people. They just want to help other people. They just want to help the people that are learning alongside them, but maybe a step or two behind them. And in 2019, that's not why you made shows. Wow. We didn't make shows to help people. We made shows to tell stories. We made shows to entertain. We made shows to introduce celebrities or authors or musicians to a bigger audience. And we made shows for as many people as we could reach. And the game right now is make shows that help people about the thing you care about most. And that will be successful as long as you deem success as helping the people I'm trying to help. And it seems to me that newer podcasters are more okay with not ranking on Apple. Nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about your charts. You're going like, hey, I got 5 DMs that this episode helped someone. That episode was a success and it was worth my time. And now because the ability to make a podcast, you buy a mic on Amazon and you can do the whole thing on Spotify for podcasters. And it does not take a lot of skill to put one up. It also isn't taking a lot of time or money to put one up. So the creators aren't feeling like, well, I've got to make money on this because it's costing me money. It's not most podcasts I'm listening to in that list. They're not paying anybody to make those shows. They're making the show. And it is a branch of the ministry they're doing in other places. And it has been eye-opening and fascinating and such a gift to get to listen through.
And have you been messaging the people after you listen to the shows?
Yes. So what I do is I start the episode.
Okay.
And I listen at 2.0. That's what I normally listen at is 1.5 to 2.0.
Same.
So I listen to it. I listen to about half of the show. And then I start my search of, can I find them on Instagram? While I'm still listening.
Yeah.
And so can I find them on Instagram? And then I do try to find them. And once I found them, then I just say, hey, I'm listening to your episode right now. Here's the number one thing that has stood out to me that I think is great. I hope you keep going. And then I send it and I finish the episode and then I move on to the next one.
I love that. It reminds me of that quote, famous Andy Stanley quote, do for one what you wish you could do for all. And so that idea about just like touch it. I was like, well, first of all, I freaked out when I saw you, when you shot me a message. I was like, my wife's name is Karen. I was like, Karen. And so it was a phenomenal way to just build that connection. And, I am curious. You do, you're not just a podcaster, you're an author, you're a speaker. You lead a company. You were also a teacher for a number of years. How would you describe the calling that God has placed on your life?
Oh, let me tell you one of the things I have learned from, this has been my full-time job since April 1st of 2012. So I'm on year 12 of this being my full-time job. The quicker you can figure out what you're uniquely called to do, the more you will experience success. And that has nothing to do with money or audience. That is what you experience in your heart is, I am succeeding here. If I am outside of my calling, but I'm getting rich or I'm famous for it, it does not feel successful. And so we are very clear about this. We have the mission of AFD Inc., which I have 2 companies. I have AFD Inc. that is my writing, my podcast that I create, and my speaking ministry. And then I also am the co-owner of the That Sounds Fun Network, where we support about 30 podcasts with community and advertising. And so I have both those companies. So with AFD Inc., we have a very clear mission statement that we are a bridge for spiritually curious people to creators and resources that we hope bridges them to Jesus in the long run. So I know exactly what I'm doing. So when I am the bridge and I am saying to people, I'm glad you're here, but have you met so-and-so? I'm glad you're here, but have you read that book? I'm glad to meet you, but do you know this friend? when they actually go to them, when people are on the podcast and their feedback to me is, oh my gosh, that sold so many books, or oh my gosh, I got so many followers, that is success to me. That doesn't make me any money or give me any followers, but that is success to me, is when we bridge people to trusted creators and resources. The other thing for me personally is I entertain people until they learn something. That's what I did when I taught school. I really believe that God gives us pretty much one calling, but we get to do a lot of expressions of that calling. Yeah. So what I did when I was teaching fifth grade, and what I do on Sunday mornings when I preach at Crosspoint Church in Nashville, what I do in my books and on podcasts, is I hopefully entertain them and the listener, or the person in the audience, or the fifth grader, until they have learned something.
One of my favorite quotes of yours is, it's okay to have a private life, but it's not okay to have a secret life.
Yes.
And I've heard you say that, and I've really adopted it in my own life as well. As your platform continues to grow, as your team continues to grow, as your businesses continue to grow, how have you stewarded that value and belief in all of those places?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I can answer that really clearly to you, because we're about to have a couple of vision casting days for AFD Inc. And I sat at a coffee shop. I live in Nashville part-time and in New York part-time. So I'm in New York currently. I sat in a coffee shop Saturday, and I wrote down, it's in this notebook right beside me. I wrote down, here's what I sense God might be doing in the next couple of years for us. Here is what I am doing as your leader to make sure I am ready to lead this and not fall into sin that would ruin it for all of us. Now, I'm going to sin all the time. Amen. But there is a difference in being a sinner and falling into sin. And so I made a list of everything I'm doing to make sure I don't have a secret life. And I'm not married yet. I don't have kids. I live alone. And so one of the key things for me is people have my location at all times. It's a safety thing, but it's an accountability thing too. Yeah. Is I can't go somewhere sneaky. I can't go. And my example I always use is Dairy Queen. I go to Dairy Queen for a lot of reasons. Sometimes it's for fun, and sometimes I'm sad. And sometimes I'm trying to meet an emotional need with a blizzard. And every time I go, Tony, I say to myself, are you good that 8 people know you're here right now? Right. Okay, great. Because 8 people have my location at all times. Are you good? You good? As long as you're good that they know you're here. If you're not good, they know you're here. We need to stop and figure out why we're going. And so people always have my location. I have a counselor I see once a month. I have a mentor I see once a month. The relationships are different, but a little symbiotic, and they kind of work together. I'm literally reading my list to you. As part of the teaching team at Crosspoint Church, I have really high accountability with the rest of our teaching team. And so I have a couple of different places I confess sin. One of them is my counselor, one is my mentor, and one is my pastor at church. And kind of going like, hey, there just can't be any secrets. I mean, even for example, I think you know this, but one of the real invitations to women right now is what we read on our Kindle. And invitation meaning there's a lot of opportunity to read a lot of things that no one will ever know. Sure. Well, I have 2 employees on my team that have access to my Amazon because we order things for the office. So every time someone sends me a book to read, I think to myself, you good with them with 2 of your employees seeing you buy that? You good? Okay, buy it. If you're not good with 2 of your employees seeing you buy that, you may need to think about why you want to read it. And so there isn't a place in my life. I have a business manager. I have a financial planner. There is not a place in my life that someone else can't see everything except my secret life with God. That is no one reads my journals. No one is, it's a room in my house. Like I have a real small library in my house in Nashville. I only call it a library because it has books. It is not fancy. It just has books, and it's too small for a bed. So therefore library. Love it. I figure if a room can't even hold a bed, you should just call it a library. Yeah. And so that's about the only thing that is secret in my life is what God and I are processing currently. That in a month or 2 months, we'll go to my mentor, we'll go to my counselor, we'll go to my pastor. And in about 6 months to a year, it'll show up in my work. It'll show up on podcasts. It'll be in books that I write. Other than that, I mean, you can give me another area of life and I can tell you who knows, but there isn't. I just think that the way I have fallen into the worst sin of my life is when nobody knows, is when I can keep it a secret. So whether that is what I'm watching online, what I'm Googling, what I'm reading, what I'm eating, where I am, who I'm talking to, I mean, I even have said I had a board of directors for a while before I had a team, and my board of directors had access to my text messages. I was like, we met once a quarter at my house, and I was like, you can look at my phone.
Wow.
You can pick anything to look at, because I just am so sure what we see over and over again, Tony, is the people who fall in their ministry fell in the middle of secrets. They fell in a big pile of secrets. So I just don't have any.
I love that. It's been a mantra that I've carried as well. One of the things that we say around here a lot is that if you're not dedicated to your disciplines, you'll be destroyed by your distractions.
Beautiful.
And so I love the way that you keep a very disciplined approach and with the counselor and the coach and all those different things. What are some of the daily things that you do to make sure that you're hearing from God? That, you obviously keep a very full schedule as much as any of us. What are some of those daily disciplines that if somebody was like, I need to hear more from God, how do I build that intimacy muscle?
That's a great question. I think I was talking with a friend about this yesterday, and she said, I don't love formulas, but I love disciplines. And the thing is, formulas, if you give a formulaic answer to how do I hear God, formulas, like when we're in science or when we're in geometry class, you expect them to have an equal sign that gives you the answer that the formula has created. And so I'm not a believer in formulaic faith. I think that leads to disappointment. Well, I did this, and therefore God should do this. It is my friend said, it's the root of the pain of purity culture is if I do these things as a teenager, then I will get this. Well, I'm 44 and single. And so purity culture formula didn't play out for me.
Right.
And so I'm not formulaic. So I will describe my disciplines with the understanding that your listeners will know that this is descriptive, not prescriptive. So the description of my disciplines, I'm a big believer in practicing Sabbath. In fact, on my list of what I'm doing for my team is I promise them that I will practice Sabbath and I will do strength training. Because I do not want my body to give up before my calling is done.
Amen.
And so how I eat and how I exercise is not about how I look. It is about me doing everything I can to do ministry and to do life as long as I can. We don't have control about just about anything, but I can control how much I pick up weights and I can't control how I treat my body. So practicing Sabbath and strength training are two of the disciplines that actually help me hear God, because I am convinced that rest and strength are two things that I need it to be who God has asked me to be. Some of my other daily disciplines, I think fasting is really important. It's not daily, but I think fasting is a discipline that, particularly for women, Tony, the enemy has really tried to steal fasting because how complicated our relationships with food and body can be. I think that's true for men too.
Yeah.
So I don't want to discount it for men, but in general, I'm not sure how old you are. Are we about the same?
44.
Are you in
I'm
your
44?
40? Yeah. Oh, exactly the same. Let's go. And so, in the 90s, there was a lot more pressure on women to be small than and for dudes to be big. And so that still lives in a lot of us, that still carries. And so fasting can feel like, what if I don't have pure motives? And what if I lose weight and people talk about it? And so the enemy's tried to steal fasting from women specifically, I think. And so I think fasting is a really important discipline. It accelerates everything and it opens you up to hear God. So there are times I have what's it called? Like I have calendar fasting.
Yeah, like a
where
rhythm.
I fast
Rhythmic.
specifically.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have rhythmic fasting. I have seasonal fasting, like our church will do 21 days or whatever. And then I have what I call 911 fasting of like, okay, this is when I need God to move. And therefore, more than I want food, I want God to move. And so those are kind of my three fasting disciplines as those go. I think being in the Word really matters. Something we're talking about a lot. One of our extensions of what we do at AFD Inc. is called Single Purpose League. And it is
it's on my list. I want to jump into that today.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things we talk about a lot with Single Purpose League is what has God actually promised you? Because the disappointment you are holding may be that you are asking God to follow up on a promise that he didn't actually make. And so how do we know what God promised to us? Well, bless God, the word is full of his promises to us. So we got to be in scripture because it also tells us what we can expect from God. And so that's one of the ways I hear the Lord. And I mean, you know this, Tony, but I grew up a soccer player. I love sports. And the reality is what we see in a game is what those players were practicing all week.
Right.
And so I got to practice prayer and I got to practice hearing God, because there's going to come a time where I'm sitting in a coffee shop and God has something for the person at the table next to me. And if I haven't practiced hearing God in my community, I'm not going to have the courage to get in the game and say, hey, can I interrupt you? I think the Lord wants to remind you that he is for you or whatever. Right. Yeah. So those are, I mean, I think hearing God is our secret weapon as business leaders, honestly, because he sees the future. And I don't care what anybody forecasts about an election or what they forecast about the economy or they forecast about what's going to happen with social media and how many, what's going to happen with gas prices. Important to pay attention to. John Tyson here in New York says, spirit-led, data-informed.
Yeah.
And that's the order. And so we have this massive advantage as people of faith and business that we can be spirit led to say these yeses and nos that do not make sense in the natural. And the Lord goes, you're going to love seeing this play out next spring because you heard me, and you're going to be ahead of the game and you're going to win in some different ways because you were spirit led, but data informed. So we don't want to be not paying attention to the economy or to inflation or to the election or any of those things. We want to be paying attention to that and to the ebb and flow of the particular industry we're in. But spirit led is our secret weapon.
Hey guys, just pausing this conversation with Annie to remind you to check out some of our incredible partners. Trent Barga over at the Barga team, you know that I love the content that he's putting out into the world. So whether you're looking for a vacation home, a real investment home, or forever home, talk to my man Trent over at the Barga team today. Also, subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's putting out a lot of great content on the real estate market. I know the end of 2024 is coming, and I want to help you get prepared. So Follow Lead Coaching, the coaching business that I own, is now doing their end of the year planning workshops. I want to work with you and your team to help establish clear objectives for 2025. So if you want to work with me, now is the time to get it on your calendar. You can email me, tony@twmilt.com, or go to follow2leadcoaching.com. Let's get on your calendar today for a successful 2025.
Watch the world's biggest tennis stars clash in the California desert at the BNP Paribas Open, live on Tennis Channel.
How do they get to these shots?
Tune in daily for exclusive first ball to last coverage from Indian Wells and witness all of the jaw-dropping action as the game's top men and women square off at one of the greatest events in sports. It's tennis magic you need to see to believe. The BNP Paribas Open, live on Tennis Channel and streaming on the Tennis Channel app.
Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
All right, friends, let's finish up this conversation with Annie.
Amen to that. One of the things that I heard somebody say once, it's always stuck with me, is that a life of integrity is a fully integrated life.
Yeah, that's good.
And so the idea that we could separate the spirit from the data is just, that's the enemy, I think, because anytime we take the spirit out of it, like it's not beneficial to what we're trying to do.
Exactly. And if we take the data out of it, we're crazy.
We're crazy, right?
Because you're like, I think the Lord said I should start doing ministry to 85-year-olds.
Right.
And then I'm like, where's the data? That's my smallest industry. That's my smallest group. That doesn't make any sense. And so the secret sauce that it makes us, what did the Lord say to be? Dove and snake, right? Didn't he say be
as wise as a dove as nope.
Shrewd.
Dang it.
We should Google this.
We should both know this.
How did people study the Bible before Google? They were just better than us.
It's fine.
We're gonna just
as wise as a serpent, as soft as it.
Dang it.
Wise as serpents. Okay. Wise as serpents, harmless as doves.
We were close.
Spirit-led, data-informed.
Yeah.
It's the same. It's the same thing. And so that's I want to be the best business person anyone meets. And because then I can go, yeah, you want me to tell you why? I pay attention to the data, but I'm saying yeses and nos based on what the Spirit is saying to me. And so I want to, that's one of the reasons we don't call AFD Inc. or That Sounds Fun Network a ministry, though I really believe in ministries.
Yeah, amen.
I feel called to be a part of business world. And so we call, even though what we do is Christ-based and very faith forward, it is still a business.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so important that you could be a Christian business and still be a business, right? Like it's both and it's not an either or. That's one of your statements as well, right? Like that's so good.
That's right.
Can I ask how your meniscus is doing?
Oh, thanks. Yeah. For our friends listening, I tore my right meniscus after tearing my left one 2 years ago. How ridiculous. I think I just still play like I'm 18 and I just play with my friends' kids and run around too much. It is doing really well. Being in New York has actually helped a ton because you walk so much that it's like practically living PT. Like there's just not a break from physical therapy. So thank you for asking. It is it has slowed me down in ways that are a little bit frustrating for me. I think that New York has done, Tony, for me, is my idols are not really thriving here. My idols are not thriving. And so the idols of comfort do not thrive here. And so this has been part of, I mean, literally right now, I'm so blessed to have a washing machine in my apartment in New York. That's very rare.
Yeah.
And the door won't open. And for a day, my clothes have been sitting in there wet and someone's coming to fix them today. And I was like in such a bad mood about it yesterday. And the Lord the whisper was, yeah, comfort really matters to you. And you think you can buy your way to comfort every time and you can't. And so my knee is also my idol of I am strong and I am able and I can do anything to stay comfortable and to stay in control is just getting dominated. Thanks be to God. So my idols are just failing left and right up here, Tony. They're failing left and right.
I tore my ACL and meniscus in 2020, and so my heart just breaks for you because I know how hard that is. It's just
that is so much worse though. Tearing an ACL, and my meniscus was minor. They just cut some pieces out. So, but brutal. I mean, how long were you in PT and rehab? Like half a year?
Yeah. Well, yes. And it was COVID. So it was extra special. And like, honestly, the blessing and all that is that if it wasn't for the meniscus tear, which was a bucket handle meniscus tear, so it flipped over.
Yeah. That's what I did on mine too. Yeah.
If it wasn't for the bucket handle meniscus tear, they would have said that you could live with the torn ACL for a while. And so it wouldn't have been emergent. And so I was so thankful for the people who showed up during that time period to do PT with me. And it was just, it's still brutal because I feel like it should not bother me anymore. And it still bothers me. And it's kind of like that nagging, like Paul would say, like a thorn in the flesh. I'm not, obviously it's not that, but it's just
you can feel that.
Yeah. It's just a lot. So anytime I hear you talk about it, I don't know this
guy at all,
my heart.
But I'm going to pitch it to you because I started following Knees Over Toes guy on Instagram.
Okay.
It is all about strengthening your knees. So once I'm still in a brace for 3 more weeks. Once I'm out of a brace, I'm going hard on Knees Over Toes guy. So, because you're right. I mean, it is a little thorn in your flesh because you and I used to be 20 and we're not. Right. And it doesn't feel good to not be 20 anymore. Well, I want my 44-year-old brain and wisdom and experience. I want my body to stay 20, and that isn't real. And so it does feel a little thorn in the flesh for actually every human because you feel yourself aging in these really beautiful, profound ways and in some scary, uncontrollable ways. And no one told us about this.
No one told me that I would be 44 and not be able to get on my knees to pray without it hurting.
When I tell you, my doctor was like, what will fixing this knee do? And I said, I have got to be able to pray on my knees. I think that is so profound, Tony. I was like, that's why Knees Over Toes guy matters to me. That's why doing my PT matters. I will not let my body get to a place as best as I can control, which I can't control everything, where I can't pray on my knees because I think that is significant. That's significant for me.
Yeah. I want to talk about the move to New York, and you've done a ton of podcasts on that, so we'll stay out of the details. But I'm curious about what you've learned about nurturing two communities that are geographically separated. I know you talk about your FOMO a lot and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but
it's so bad.
It's so bad. I can't imagine.
It's so bad.
What have you learned about yourself nurturing two different communities and being in two different places, and obviously worshiping both places, and you're working from both places, but what have you learned about yourself in the process?
Getting engaged can be stressful. Getting the right ring won't be at BlueNile.com. The jewelers at BlueNile.com have sparkle down to a science with beautiful lab-grown diamonds worthy of your most brilliant moments. Their lab-grown diamonds are independently graded and guaranteed identical to natural diamonds and ready to ship to your door. Get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more with code SPOTIFY at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com, code SPOTIFY for $50 off.
10 years from today, Lisa Schneider will trade in her office job to become the leader of a pack of dogs. As the owner of her own dog rescue, that is. A second act made possible by the reskilling courses Lisa's taking now with AARP to help make sure her income lives as long as she does. And she can finally run with the big dogs and the small dogs who just think they're big dogs. That's why the younger you are, the more you need AARP. Learn more at aarp.org/skills.
Sometimes I think I was built for this. I was built for two cities. I was built for, so most of the time I think, I can't believe I get to do this. Now, again, my clothes are locked in my washing machine. So it's also has some very annoying moments in both cities. But some of me thinks I was always built for this. You're right. The FOMO happens. I just had breakfast with one of my friends here in New York, and she was like, "Are you here on the 26th?" And I was like, "Nope." She was like, "Can you get back on the 26th?" And I was like, "Maybe," and so I am, the FOMO is real. Some of the profound things I've learned is watching God operate in two totally different cities, but really moving in two totally different cities is fascinating because I'm watching it in real time. Because I didn't move all the way to New York or stay all the way in Nashville. I'm involved in both churches. And according to Barna, if I show up every Sunday, which I can't show up every Sunday because I'm traveling for work or whatever, but let's say I show up 3 out of 4 Sundays at one church or another, I'm still above the average of the average of church Tinder, right?
Amen.
The church at Tinder. And so a lot of my communities in both cities do not recognize that I am not there when I'm not there. Because, they weren't there the week before and they're out of town this weekend and, Annie's here. It's kind of like, Annie's here. And so that's been really interesting, Tony, because both cities are pretty transient. No one expects everyone to be there every week. Whereas the town I grew up in, you're at church every Sunday because you're traveling. Most people didn't travel for work where I grew up. They traveled for vacation. And so that kind of serves me that I've picked two cities that are transient by nature. So seeing God operate in both is really interesting. I also New York does not care about my job. And that has been really humbling in some ways I didn't expect. Pretty much in the South and in a lot of places, when I show up, I can show up with probably someone knows what I do.
Yeah.
I'm public enough that someone knows what I do.
I call you Christian famous. Annie's Christian famous.
Yeah, thanks. And I'm known by a side group of the world, right? So yes,
sure.
That is not true here. New York does not care. And in a lot of communities, mostly in the South, probably being a believer really not only serves you as a person, it serves you socially and professionally to identify as a Christian. And that is not true in New York. And so it's really stretching me. I said to a friend recently that my muscle has really atrophied of just being a woman in a new place and having to meet new people. So I am very thankful that God, I went to a thing at a church here on Saturday and I was so uncomfortable, Tony. I was like, no one knows who I am. I just want to look at my phone. I just want to go home. I don't want to be here. I want to get up and go home instead of meeting anyone new. And I was like, oh yeah, this is how everyone actually feels and how you used to feel.
Right.
So meet some people. So that's been good. I mean, New York is such a gift. There's so much going on here. There's a real renaissance of art and faith people particularly. And there is a lot God is doing here. And there is a lot of darkness that we want to push back and dispel. And so I'm having a blast doing it. How long do I get to do it? I don't know. It's the plan as far as I can see going forward. And I also think that's how we should live. Wherever you are, be all the way there, and don't plan like, well, in a year, I'm not going to be here. And therefore, so I'm living like I'm never leaving either place, and we'll see what God does.
That's amazing. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today is the Single Purpose League. And you brought on your team one of my favorite humans, Katie Boatman.
Yeah. Wait, how do you know Katie?
Katie was on the podcast when she did the anxiety book for girls.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
so my daughter Shiloh she's 12 and she's tweeny and she's angsty. And so when Katie was still working, I think for IF, she came on the podcast. And so I love Katie. I followed her on Instagram for a while now since I had her on the pod. And so I love watching that. And I listened to the conversation that you two had where you really poured out your heart on the That Sounds Fun podcast about the Single Purpose League. And I'm curious, like, this was kind of a big, like, it felt to me as someone who just is a fan of your work as a big flag planting moment for you, where you're like, for once you're like, hey, I'm just, this is a part of my life and I'm okay with it. And like, I'm here for it. And so I'm curious if you could just share kind of the origin story, and maybe for the people who don't know what it is, give kind of an overview.
Yes, you're exactly right. So one of the ways I get to live in two cities is I don't have a husband yet and I don't have kids. And so I can kind of put myself wherever I want to. I have never been married. I've been single all 44 years. And from the beginning, there were two things I said to God we weren't going to talk about publicly. Yeah. You know how that goes. One of them was my singleness and one was my body. I was like, these two things are mine and we aren't going to make them public. And neither of those things have remained true. But for a long time, I mean, my fear, Tony, and I'll tell you, my fear still maybe in some ways is when you become the poster child, you stay that thing. And so I never wanted to be the poster child for single Christianity. That was uninteresting to me because I was like, no, this is not a place I'm trying to live. I'm standing on the platform at the train station trying to get out of this town. Yeah. Like, what can I do to get out of here? And last summer, so that's always been my mindset. I'll talk about it when someone brings it up. I'm uninterested in making it a part of what I do. Last summer of 23, we did a series on the podcast called Summer Lovin', where it was about dating. And so right before that, we thought, well, let's see if there's any single people. Let's see how many single people follow me on Instagram, and let's get their email addresses and make sure they know. Yeah. And that they would share with their friends. I mean, it was borderline a marketing play. Sure. Of like, can we get single people to listen to this and to tell their friends to listen to this dating
Spirit-led, informed by the data.
That's it. And so speaking of that, get this. You may have heard me tell this story, but so we said, okay, it'd be great if we got 1,000 email addresses the week we're opening this form to fill out. So I get on Instagram, I make a reel that says, hey, are you single? I would love your email address. I'm not selling you anything. I just want to tell you something. In an hour, we had 1,000 email addresses. Wow. And we were like, okay. By the end of the week, 20,000 singles had given me their email address. And all of a sudden we went, this is not what we thought it was. Yeah. I mean, I could get teary talking to you about it, Tony. All of a sudden it was like, the 20,000 people want me to say something to them about singleness. Then data informed. Now we need to know what the Spirit is doing. Yeah. And so we changed our entire marketing plan that summer. And instead we went, okay, we're going to lead you in a way to pray. We're going to lead you for this instead. And so we send an email every week. We're almost a year later, right? A year and a half later. It was June of 23. And we still have 16,000 of those email addresses. Only 4,000 have unsubscribed.
That's wild.
It's wild, Tony. It's wild. And so last fall in our vision days, we do vision days every October, 3 full days for the company. And last fall we went, what do we do? We saw what happened in the summer. And that's where Single Purpose League was born, is we thought, okay, let's make a community that is behind a paywall because we want an investment from them that they are going to be a part of the community. And I wanted Katie, who was hired for a totally different reason. Katie felt passionate about it. I wanted us to be able to employ her through this full time. And you got to pay for technology too. You got to pay for the Patreon, all the things. So, so it's $7 a month, and it really is just this community where every month we pick a different topic. The main question we're asking is, what is my single purpose on earth, no matter what my marital status is, and what is my purpose while I'm single?
Yeah.
And where are those different and where are those the same? And so every month we talk about a different topic. We have podcasts that are just for them. That one you listened to was originally just for Single Purpose League. And then Katie and I were like, this is meant, we need other people to hear this. We need our married friends to hear some of the things that we talk about when we think we're only talking to each other. And then there's we call a chapter meeting every month, a live stream. And then we're starting to do gatherings because Tony, the other wild thing, and then I could talk about this forever. Well, I have two more thoughts, but the first one is, the other wild thing is, we thought the Patreons I'm a member of, I want more content from the creators. That's why I've paid. I pay for, Popcast. I like more content from them. I pay for the Big Boocast. And then I pay for, Search Engine. I don't know if you listen to Search Engine, but he's literally doing, PJ Vogt literally takes Google questions and does an entire episode to answer them instead of Googling it.
Wow.
So like, are the monkeys in the zoo really unhappy? And then there's a whole episode about it. It's fascinating. But he kind of said from the beginning, like, you can listen to ads or you can pay to support me building this. So those are the three I pay for because I want more content. Tony, we started SPL in February. By April, the number one thing people wanted was friendship.
Yeah.
They were like, can we be together? Can you get us together? Can we meet each other? And we were like, oh, wait, we weren't planning on that at all. We were just going to give you content to talk about. And so we joke that this is a houseboat that we're building as we go. And so now we're like, okay, we're all going to Dollywood in December. And a couple hundred people there's over 2,000 people in Single Purpose League right now. A couple of hundred are going to Dollywood. We're launching some local meetups where we're just like, go meet up with each other. Like, we don't know. You don't have to fly anywhere. Because there's 2,000 people there in every state and they're in every city, major city. And so that's what we're having to learn how to do, Tony, is we didn't realize people wanted friendship. We thought they wanted content. And so we're still giving content because we think that's important, but we're also working really hard to go like, especially in 2025, how do we get y'all together? Because what single Christians need is to be seen and cared for and seen by each other and seen by their married friends. And Single Purpose League is giving a place where singles feel seen. And so that's fascinating.
So I want to ask about that. I'm an associate pastor on the teaching team at my church, and then I own my own business, coaching business, and I'm also on some boards. And I've got I have people in my life who are like work for some of those organizations that are single. And then obviously at the church, there are lots of people who are single. What's the first step that we can do in seeing our single friends, male or female?
Get coffee.
Okay.
Get coffee. And actually, Tony, I'll get this resource to you, and you are welcome to send it out like crazy. Because here's the interesting thing. I'm also a teaching pastor at a church. I'm also unmarried. And so what do I get to do? I get to be a bridge, which is our mission from the beginning.
That's amazing.
And so we actually have just created a resource for pastors on pastoring singles that we are just giving to pastors. Because what I keep hearing from pastors, for example, I was on a pastor's podcast, and they said, give us an example of what singles need that's different than what married people need. And I said, when you're teaching on Sabbath, you often tell us to turn off our phones. That is not available to single people. That is unsafe for us to turn off our phones, and it's deeply lonely. And the pastor said, I've never thought about that once.
Wow.
Of course he hasn't. And most of our pastor friends got married in their 20s because there was this narrative that is playing out to be true of, if you want to be a lead pastor, you have to be married. And so a lot of y'all, as you were getting into the ministry, went, I need to get married and I need to go to seminary because this is the thing God has called me to. Well, meanwhile, a lot of women were going, I want to be in ministry and I want to be married. So I'm going to jump into ministry and then look around. And what has happened is a lot of the men got married and got into ministry. A lot of the women got into the ministry and looked around and all the dudes were married.
Yes.
Right. And so then the second thing that happened is y'all all went to seminary and there was not a class on how to pastor singles because there's never been a singles community like this. And so pastors feel unequipped and a little bit scared in my conversations. Singles feel frustrated. What I am preaching to the singles and yelling to the singles is help your pastors. Don't be mad.
Amen.
Help them. They do not know. You are asking them to know things they cannot know. So get coffee with them, get a meeting with them, and come with an open heart and a good attitude that says, can I help you? And so that's why we made the resource, Tony, because, I will give to you, and you're welcome to share a link with everybody. And everybody can have it. We don't need anything. Just have it.
Right.
Because it literally lists, here's like 10 questions you can ask the single people that you get coffee with that will just help you. And like, here's some thoughts when you're writing your sermons that will matter to single people. And here's some ways to create events that single people will actually show up to in 2024 that are, it's pretty easy to get college kids together.
Sure.
It's significantly more challenging to get 40-year-old singles together.
Amen.
And so anyway, I almost feel like this may be one of the highest things I've ever been called to is to build a bridge between pastors who want and desperately, like your question, pastors, there is not a pastor who doesn't care about ministering to the single people in their church. Y'all deeply care.
Deeply.
And there's not a single, here's the wild thing. We did a survey. I know I'm going long, sorry. We did a survey to our Single Purpose League. We said, do you feel like the church sees you? 65% said no.
Wow.
Okay. But here's the other thing. We said, where do you want to meet someone? Of the top 10 answers, 3 of them involve their church.
Woo-hoo.
So they don't currently feel seen, but they're not leaving.
Right.
They're staying because that's where they want to meet somebody and that's where they want to be involved. And so we get to bridge, you and me, even in this conversation, get to say to pastors, we know you're trying. We know you are. How can we help? And we get to say to singles, I understand your frustration. Have you tried to help at all? Have you tried to help? Get in there and meet with your pastor, meet with the campus pastor, meet with the disciple pastor. You do not have to go to the guy who preaches. Get with anybody on staff and start a conversation and be helpful. Be helpful. And so I would just say to you, Tony, as a pastor, grab coffee with somebody that's unmarried and just say, hey, last time I taught, here's what I was thinking about when it came to singles. What else could I have thought about? What was I not thinking about? And when you come like that and go, how can I make this better for you? And the single shows up with a heart of how can I help? And how can I be a part of this? Then singles across our country are going to be this powerful force for the kingdom because they are supported by the church family. Because we are a family. This one random example happened at a church where they took the staff to the zoo. And they said, it's family day at the zoo. And the singles didn't go.
Oh, wow.
Because they didn't feel welcomed. All the singles had to do, one of them had to say to the person doing culture, had to say, hey, could you throw in a sentence that everybody's welcome? That would have solved it. All the church staff had to do was say, hey, when we say family, we mean all of you. We would love for all of you to be there.
That's so true.
It was literally, Tony, it was one sentence on each side that needed to be said that would have resolved it. And so by the grace of God, can you and I help find that one sentence that helps everybody feel on the same team? So I am like clearly super passionate about helping our pastors feel supported because I trust the hearts of the pastors.
Yeah.
I trust our pastors. And I want our singles to show up with a trusting stance that says, how can I be a part of this church family?
So beautiful. I love that. I want to honor your time. And so I have one more question for you. But before I ask it, where is the best place? By the way, I stole this whole setup at the end from you. So thank you.
Great. I love it.
A different question at the end. But where is the best place for people to get into the Annie F. Downs world?
Yeah. I mean, because there's another Annie Downs who's a famous quilter in Australia, I am Annie F. Downs absolutely everywhere.
Yeah.
So all you need, F for fancy. AnnieFDowns.com is the best place. Singlepurposeleague.com is where you can get, and you can send that to your single friends and say, hey, this is a place you may want to join up and get in this conversation. And so that's where I am. Easy to find. And then the podcast is called That Sounds Fun. And so, and our That Sounds Fun network has a bunch of shows. We like to say our network is like an amusement park where you kind of know the theme. The theme is that the people are going to share your faith.
Yeah.
Now, what they're going to talk about is a bazillion different things. And you may like some rides more than others.
Right.
But you can trust that the backbone is the same of everyone on the That Sounds Fun network.
Amen. Amen. Okay, here's the last question. It's an advice question. I invite you to go back in time and give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the season of life that you're in.
Oh, okay. Oh, I love this. I'm ready.
So I want to take you back to the end of your very first podcast episode.
Okay.
Right? You just wrapped it up. It's just taking the headphones off. If you could sit knee to
Decker.
knee 10 years ago, right? 10 years ago. If you could sit
exactly 10
knee
years
to
ago.
knee with that younger version of yourself, hold her hand and look her deeply in the eyes.
Yeah.
What are you going to tell her?
I think I would say, this is what you've dreamed of. You don't know it, but this is what you've dreamed of. And so I think if I could go back and talk to her, I would release the pressure of, am I supposed to do this? And I would just tell her, yeah, go. Because I think probably I spent the first 2 years sussing that out, and we could have done more work if I wouldn't have spent so much time sussing that out. So I would give her the go. I'd say, go, girl. You got it. This is it. Go.
Amen. Annie, thank you so much for being such a leader in our industry and for being a leader for me personally. And just that means the absolute world that you're so generous with your time today.
Thanks, Tony. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you for what you do. I meant it when I said that this podcast was a good listen. So thank you so much.
What an amazing storyteller. I love Annie's heart. She's got deep insights. Such an honor to interview her. It was one of those conversations I won't soon forget. So thankful for her. I really appreciated the way that she dove into the idea that we need to kind of lean into that single purpose and how we see people and how it really matters. Such good content there for leaders, no matter what you're leading. Do me a favor, reach out to Annie, let her know that you heard her here on the podcast and how much you appreciated her generosity of time. It goes a long way to help continue to spread the platform. And if this podcast was meaningful for you, share it with a friend. That always is the highest compliment you can give me anytime you share the podcast. So thank you as always. I appreciate you, my podcast family. And remember, guys, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.